The air in the house was thick, a humid blanket that made every movement feel heavy and deliberate. I stood in the center of my old bedroom, the floorboards warm beneath my bare feet, feeling the light fabric of my summer dress cling to my skin in the stifling July heat. The silence of the house was punctuated only by the distant hum of a lawnmower somewhere down the street, and the rhythmic, slow thud of my own heart. I had just come from a long, scorching shower, trying to wash away the grit of a 6-hour bus ride, but the steam had only added to the weight of the atmosphere. My skin was still damp, tingling from the transition of hot water to the stagnant air, and for the first time in years, I felt a strange, restless energy vibrating just beneath the surface. Coming back home after a year at university was supposed to be a reset. I'd spent months buried in textbooks, living in a cramped dorm where privacy was a luxury, and the air always smelled like old laundry and desperation. I had missed the quiet of my small hometown, the way the light hit the oak trees in the backyard, and the comfort of a place where I didn't have to be anyone but myself. But as I stood there, looking at the faded posters on my walls, I realized that myself had changed. I wasn't the same girl who had left last August, and as I soon discovered, I wasn't the only one who had grown up. I had intended to surprise my parents, but the house was empty when I arrived, or so I thought. I was halfway through a glass of water in the kitchen when Joe walked in. Joe was the kid from the house next door, but the word neighbor never felt right. Our parents had been best friends since before we were born, and Joe had been a permanent fixture in my life for 20 years. He was the one I'd played tag with until the sun went down, the one I'd helped with his math homework, the one I'd teased relentlessly about his awkward middle school haircut. He was practically my brother, a constant, safe, and predictable part of my world. But when he stepped into the kitchen, the safe and predictable part of that equation vanished. He had turned 18 while I was away, and the boy I'd left behind had been replaced by a man. He was taller, his shoulders filled out, and he moved with a new, grounded grace. When he saw me, his face broke into a wide, easy smile that made something in my chest tighten in a way I didn't recognize. "Kate, you're home early," he said, his voice dropping an octave from the last time I'd heard it. "I couldn't wait," I managed to say, leaning back against the counter. I was hyper-aware of how short my dress was, how my hair was still damp and messy from the shower. The casual, brotherly dynamic we'd shared for 2 decades suddenly felt like a suit that didn't fit anymore. As the afternoon stretched into the evening, the heat didn't let up. We ended up on the sofa in the living room, the windows thrown open to catch a breeze that never came. The house was still empty. My parents had texted saying they were stuck at a community meeting across town. It was just us. Joe seemed unusually quiet, his eyes fixed on the floor as he picked at a loose thread on his jeans. "You okay, Joe?" I asked. The distance between us on the couch felt too large, and at the same time, not nearly large enough. He sighed, a long, heavy sound that seemed to carry the weight of the whole summer. "I don't know. It's been a weird few months, Kate. Things with Sarah, they're just not working. We've been fighting about everything. I feel like I'm constantly trying to be someone I'm not, just to keep her from getting angry." He looked at me then, and the vulnerability in his eyes was staggering. This wasn't the little brother looking for advice on a video game. This was a man who felt isolated and misunderstood. "I just want things to be simple again. I want to be around someone who actually knows me, not the version of me I have to put on for everyone else." "I know that feeling," I said softly. I moved closer, sliding across the leather cushions until our knees were almost touching. University was like that for me, a lot of performing, a lot of pretending I had it all figured out when I was actually just lonely. I reached out, my hand hovering for a second before I rested it on his forearm. His skin was warm, and I could feel the tension in his muscles. It was meant to be a gesture of comfort, a reminder that I was here, that I was the same person who had always looked out for him. But the moment my fingers touched his skin, the nature of the comfort changed. It wasn't sibling-like, it was electric. The air in the room seemed to vibrate. I could hear the sound of his breathing, heavy and rhythmic, syncing up with mine. Neither of us moved. Neither of us spoke. The silence was thick with 20 years of history, and one sudden, undeniable realization. The bond we had was shifting into something neither of us knew how to name. "Kate," he whispered, his voice barely audible over the hum of the ceiling fan. "I'm right here, Joe," I replied. I didn't pull my hand away. Instead, I let my fingers trace the line of his arm, a slow, tentative movement that felt like a question. He didn't recoil. He leaned into the touch, his eyes never leaving mine. There was a gravity between us, a pull that had probably been there for a long time, masked by the labels we'd grown up with. But in the heat of that empty house, those labels didn't matter anymore. I leaned in, my heart hammering against my ribs like a trapped bird. I could feel the warmth radiating off him, the scent of summer and something uniquely him. When our lips finally met, it wasn't a tentative first kiss. It was the breaking of a dam. All the years of friendship, all the shared secrets, and the new adult attraction we were both feeling collided in that one moment. It was a slow, deliberate exploration. My hand moved to the back of his neck, my fingers tangling in the hair at the nape of his neck, while his hand settled on my waist, pulling me closer until there was no space left between us. It wasn't about drama or shock. It was about the profound relief of finally being seen, of finally being touched by someone who knew exactly who I was. The world outside, my parents, the neighbors, the rules of our upbringing, all of it felt miles away. In that living room, under the slow rotation of the fan, we were just two people who had found each other in a way we never expected. It was the most natural thing in the world, and at the same time, the most world-shaking. When the sound of a car in the driveway finally forced us apart, we didn't look at each other with regret or shame. We looked at each other with a new kind of understanding. We smoothed our clothes and adjusted our expressions as my parents walked through the front door, calling out our names and complaining about the heat. We played our parts for the rest of the evening, eating dinner, sharing stories about my first year away, but every time our eyes met across the table, the air would charge up all over again. That night, lying in my bed, I realized that I hadn't just come home for the summer. I had come home to a different life. Joe wasn't just the boy next door anymore, and I wasn't just his big sister figure. We were at the beginning of something complicated and beautiful, something that defied the categories people wanted to put us in. And as I drifted off to sleep, the only thing I felt was a deep, quiet certainty. It's strange how someone who has been a constant in your life for as long as you can remember can suddenly become a complete stranger and the most important person in the world all at once. I think we all have those moments where a relationship shifts and you realize you never really knew the full depth of the person standing right in front of you. Have you ever had a connection with someone you grew up with suddenly change into something more? Or have you ever found that coming home meant discovering something entirely new about yourself? I'd love to hear your thoughts or your own stories in the comments below. Let's talk about those life-changing shifts.